We are thrilled to welcome back an exceptional JPIS alumnus today, someone who has truly made a mark both academically and beyond. Aarav Gandhi has not only excelled in his studies but also made a huge impact through his remarkable extracurricular work, particularly with Project Gharana, which eventually led him to the prestigious Yale University. But today, it's not just about his impressive achievements. Aurav will also take us through his journey at Yale, share how JPI has helped shape his character, and offer some valuable advice for all the aspiring students here. So let's dive in.
Um, Hello, I'm Aarav. I was in the class of 23 at JPIS, and I'm now a sophomore at Yale. I'm majoring in mechanical engineering and urban studies. I'm from Bombay, and I was a boarding student in the hostel at JPIS. And yeah.
What was your approach to preparing your application, and what tips or advice would you have for aspiring students who are looking to apply to the same colleges?
So I tried to make sure that my activity list was as sort of diverse as possible so that it wasn't very focused on only the major I was applying to, but also just showed like different characteristics and like traits of who I am as a person and like sort of the things I was involved with. And so I think the activity list was a big part of my application, obviously. And then other than that, I had to make sure that my obviously my grades were good in school. My SAT score was strong, and then for essays, just trying to take on as much advice as I could from Ayusha and Akriti ma'am to make sure that it sort of conveyed different aspects of my sort of application and my personality because with each sort of supplement and with each essay, you have the ability to show a different aspect or sort of facet of yourself. And so it was important to make sure that each of my essays covered like different ideas or different topics that could be communicated to the officers.
Okay. And obviously, like you said, you had an extensive list of ECs, at least that's what you tried to do. But which activity of yours do you think contributed the most to your college application? And can you give a little bit of a backstory about this activity, how you came up with the idea, the challenges you faced while executing it?
Yeah, so I think probably hands down the standout activity for my activity list, and also one that I spoke a lot about in my essays was Project Gharana. It was essentially a passion project that came into being once I visited like a factory and I saw an old shipping container used as like a sort of office on site. And sort of combined that with my interest in design and in engineering, and sort of try to take all of those aspects into addressing the problem of homelessness. And so I did initial research, and this was part of my design technology project in school. And then I took it to Ayush sir and Akriti ma'am, and I was talking to them about the idea, and they sort of asked me why I don't actually end up doing something like this, and instead of just having it be a project idea, why don't I actually execute it? So I started a fundraiser on Keto, and then in like 3 weeks raised funds from my friends and family to create my first sort of container home, which was based on initial projections and research that I'd done. And then I met with Reddy sir, who the head of like engineering. And so basically took advice from him on how I can actually feasibly execute the project, sort of created initial designs on CAD software, showed him what I planned to do, and then contacted different vendors for the different materials that I wanted to sort of procure. And then so after that initial planning, once I had the funds, I sort of placed orders to make sure I could get all the materials, created a sort of timeline with both Reddy sir and internally based on my assignments and stuff to sort of plan out how I could best allocate my time to building a home. And it's essentially over the course of the next few months, I built a sustainable container home. And so Project Gharana basically aimed to create these sustainable container homes that could then be donated to families who don't have access to shelter. And so essentially addressing both the issue of houselessness and sort of unsustainable construction with one solution. And so I created this first home, and it's probably still standing on the JPIS campus somewhere. And it's essentially a 20 by 8 foot, so 160 square foot container outfitted with solar panels, a water harvesting sort of system, and living areas and sleeping areas for a family of four. And the plan was to sort of carry this project forward and sort of replicate these homes to create more of them. And I got a pledge from AU Small Finance Bank to sort of finance 50 more of these containers. But then I was in 12th grade, and so I wasn't able to continue the project. But up until that point, this is sort of the progress I'd made. In terms of hardships, I think the biggest challenge would have been balancing everything in terms of other commitments I had at school, my other academic sort of commitments as well, and giving time to this project. I had great help from sort of the carpenters, plumbers, electricians, and like the sort of team at JPIS itself. And because I was in the boarding house, I got to spend time after school as well, sort of on site doing sort of work on the project. But I think one of the biggest challenges was just making sure that I stay within the budget because I fundraised and sort of received my funds initially. And so to sort of make sure that I stretch each rupee as far as I could to make sure that every single thing I'd need in the home could be sort of procured within the funds I had. And then to just make sure that in terms of a timeline, I don't sort of stretch it too far. I was supposed to finish it, I think, end of January. It ended up going to the first or second week of March. So I did overshoot my timeline a bit. And so sort of just coming up with ways to ensure that I have a plan moving forward, regardless of the delays that occurred, to make sure that I actually have a finished sort of product and project to show, but the people who've given me the funds to be able to do this, and just in general for the completion of this project.
Can I just say one thing? Firstly, your container home is still, it's like next to the football field, it's still there. And
Yeah.
there's a picture of you that's framed, of you with your hands up in front of the container home. And that's in the council, that's framed and put in the counseling room, like me with Meenal ma'am and everyone over
That's
there.
wow. What do you
Yeah.
mean hands up? Like just like this?
No, your hands were like this, and you're like standing in front of the home.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So obviously, like you said, you had to balance academics and your ECs, but and you had an amazing SAT score. So my SAT score is coming out in I think 5 minutes from now. So my question is, how did you prepare for your SAT, and what advice would you give to someone who's just starting to prepare?
I think for me, I tried to give my first attempt. First of all, like good luck for your score. Hope you do well. But I started off with my first attempt doing it on my own. I thought I was pretty good at math, and so I felt like I would be able to do SAT math on my own. And so I sort of started just doing Khan Academy like practice tests and studying like that. I got a few resources from my seniors at that time, which was Erica Meltzer's English books. And so I sort of just did that practice and did. Sorry.
I use the same ones.
Yeah. So I started doing that practice myself first. My score wasn't like great, but it wasn't bad the first time. But then after that, I realized that math, while I could pretty much figure it out myself, I had a pretty decent score in math from my first attempt. English, I definitely needed help, and so I started coaching with a teacher, and she basically helped me with English. It was basically a continuation of Erica Meltzer's books, ensuring that I have the strategies down for the different sort of English requirements, both for reading, like comprehension, and the other writing section, just to make sure there's so many like nuances of like English that I didn't know, like when to use a period, when to use like a comma, stuff like that. I didn't know how to
Yeah.
figure out. And so having a teacher helped me sort of structure my learning and made sure that I was able to sort of fulfill the requirements of the test and make sure I knew how to ace that specific section. In terms of advice, I feel like what worked for me was just making sure I divided or rather gave more time to SAT than my academic commitments at that time, at least in the few weeks leading up to the exam. Obviously, keeping in mind that once the exam was over, I'd put in more effort to sort of re um regain a grasp over academics that may have sort of been on the back burner. But I think that worked for me because I was able to ensure that my time through the day was productively spent making sure I'm giving enough practice tests and I'm sort of going over the feedback and going like revising the sort of mistakes I made, which was also very important because I feel like a lot of the times, at least with my first attempt, once I gave a test, it was sort of out of mind. And regardless of the mistakes like made, I always said to myself that I wouldn't make them again, but I sort of didn't sort of analyze where I went wrong. And I think that's sort of a mindset change after my first attempt that helped me figure out where I'm actually making those mistakes, figure out sort of patterns of maybe repeated mistakes that I was making to sort of make sure that those don't occur over and over again. And then, like I said, just make sure that if you're taking time away from academics because you're sort of focusing on your SAT, which at that point is very important. You need to make sure that you sort of go back to your academics after and sort of give it that extra time to get back on track. And so I think that balance initially was a little difficult to establish, but once I sort of set a plan of how I would regain or a grasp of my academics, I was okay and I sort of felt fine not giving all that time to my academics
Yeah,
while I was preparing for the SAT.
makes sense. So now, obviously, talking about Yale, um, what, how do you describe the campus culture at Yale? Like, if you had to like describe any traditions that you've been a part of, or like just in general, how is Yale?
So I think one experience from or rather at Yale that's very different to normal state schools or like the other universities in US, or rather like non-Ivy League universities, is that they have amazing sports infrastructure. Yale does not. So that was a big sort of, I guess, disappointment almost in my campus culture. But I feel like that's something that I've learned to appreciate and love because when we do have sporting events, it's a very big community sort of vibe where everyone is um just everyone goes for the games, everyone's just part of the entire atmosphere around it. And so I think one of the biggest traditions or biggest events on campus every year is like the Harvard versus Yale game. That's our biggest rivalry. And the American football game that we have every year is very well attended. And it's sort of a big event. That entire weekend becomes an entire like sort of just fun time with kids either visiting from Harvard or you when you're in Boston at Harvard. Because kids travel up and down for the game every year. That's, I think, one of the biggest traditions. Other than that, campus culture, I feel like it's a very work hard, play hard environment where Monday through Thursday, you'll not see anybody doing anything but pretty much studying most of the day, especially during, not even during exams. During exams, it's most of the days, but before exams, like through the semester, it's sort of Monday to Thursday, very studious vibe. But then Friday evenings or most kids don't even have classes on Friday. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday is more hanging out with friends when the weather's nice, playing sports outside, going for hikes, just finding things to do in New Haven, which as a city isn't great. It's a bit of a town, kind of like Mahapura slash Jaipur itself.
Yeah.
There's not much to do in New Haven, so we sort of go out. We go to like neighboring cities quite a bit. So I go to New York quite often. That's obviously a lot of fun. And just yeah, otherwise campus culture is mainly, like I said, work hard, play hard, where through the week everybody is collectively studying together. So there's a lot of collaborative group study. And then over the weekend, it's more of like unwinding, relaxing, while also start like a mix on the weekends.
Yeah, makes sense. Um, Obviously, so can you describe how you felt on your first day at Yale?
I mean, I was definitely quite nervous. This was my first time being away from home, so far from home. I had my mom come and drop me, and I guess once she left, it sort of rather while she was in New Haven, it was still orientation week. So that entire week was sort of it wasn't still like set in stone, like the feeling of being away from home. It was still like okay, I'm on holiday types because everyone over there for orientation is just like hanging out, getting to know each other. But I think once classes started, it sort of hit that, I was so far away from home. But I guess just making use of the fact that everybody there was also a first year like me away from home. Yale has a sort of residential college system where you're living around like above and below you are people who are in your same residential college and who will continue to be in the same college as you for the next 4 years. And so building or rather having that community from the get-go was extremely important in having a good transition into Yale. And I feel like because I did an orientation program where it was mostly international kids, I got another sense of community with my sort of other international friends, including those from India, which while there weren't a lot, they obviously gave that initial sense of comfort being away from home, having sort of familiar people who've come from a familiar background. And so I think that initial adjustment, having those few sort of people, both in my residential college and from India helped. And then after that, it gave me a sort of base from which I could continue to branch out and make a lot of new friends, which I've continued to do.
And obviously, you spent a year and a half, almost 2 years, living in a hostel at JPIS. So, how much of an impact, like, did that help ease your transition into Yale, or was it a completely different environment?
I think for me, it was a good stepping stone. I don't think moving from Mumbai directly to the US would have been a smooth transition for me. I think it would have been a very drastic change with a lot of luxuries or sort of comforts of life that I just have in general, we all would have at home that we won't have in the US. Something as simple as just doing your laundry every like week, making your own bed, cleaning your own room, stuff like that is stuff that you almost sort of subconsciously don't realize you need to do when you're at home. And so I feel like JPIS for me was a good stepping stone. I moved with two of my very close friends from from my previous school to JPIS. So again, having that initial sense of comfort while settling into JPIS was great for me. But still moving and living away from home, having that sense of independence definitely helped me. And that created a good foundation for then eventually moving to the US because I feel like I'd already experienced living by myself, and having that independence. It was just instead of coming home every month, it was now every 3 or 4 months. And so it was definitely still a change, but it was a good middle ground for me. And I think it definitely helped.
And um sorry, and studying the IB curriculum and studying at college, I imagine, is completely different. So what can you highlight a few differences? Because the IB is a very straightforward, like you study this is your syllabus, you study this, you write this essay.
Yeah.
Is college similar or is it different?
So I feel like college is not structured in that way at all. Professors have like the entire liberty to decide how they want to run that course. So there's
Yeah.
some professors who have a final exam worth 50% of your final grade, while some professors have it worth maybe like 20. So it's a big sort of difference in how different professors run courses. And so from the IB where you have a sort of straightforward structure where you know how your classes and your content is going to be over the next or over like those 2 years. College isn't a lot like that. Moving in, I think it's very important to recognize that each professor, even for the same class, can teach the class in two completely different ways. And so for me, that was a very big change. Figuring out what each professor's requirements were took some time. And I feel like compared to the IB, college requires a lot more consistent work throughout the semester because, for example, homework sets for math and physics, which take maybe 6 to 7 hours a week each, stuff like that over the semester, once a week, sum up to maybe 30% of your final grade. So they have a very big sort of role to play in how your semester and sort of progress is determined. Versus in the IB, where I mean, you don't have much homework other than studying for exams. And so that was a big mindset change where instead of just coming and studying before midterms or finals, you're sort of working through the week, every week for the entire semester. And that sort of consistency is something that the IB kind of prepares you for when I guess you have IAs and then other deadlines and other tests and then midterms to study for. But for the other periods of the year, the IB isn't as rigorous as colleges because college is just a lot more consistent work. So it's important to, from the get-go, establish a foundation and have sort of a routine set of consistent work because it's very easy to fall behind. 1 week of not doing that work can lead to a sort of big dip or change in your final grade, only because over there, everything leads up to the grade you have at the end versus IB, where it's just those sort of exams and then your IAs that determine it. Yeah, so I think that was just the biggest change for me to just have to keep doing consistent work over the entire semester.
And what is your like daily routine at Yale? Like, is there stuff that you do every day? Do you play sports? Do you participate in like some ECs?
Yeah, so days typically start based on when you have classes between either 9 or 10:30. Some people have at 11, but my classes, at least this semester, have mostly every day been 10:30. And so my day starts with breakfast earlier than that with a few friends and then go to classes. After class, lunch, and then back to class until maybe 2 or 3. So it's not a very long day. You have maybe 4 hours max of class a day. After that, it's typically working on a problem set or like the homework problems with a few friends from any of the classes, either for me, math or my physics classes, and working on that for a few hours. Dinner timings were a big change for me. I'm used to eating dinner at home, maybe at 8, 8:30. Over
Yeah.
there, I eat dinner at like 5:30 or 6 every day, only because dining halls, at least at Yale, are from like 5 to 7. p.m. And so eating dinner early, and then after dinner it's pretty chill. Either going to the gym, we have like butteries, which are these like late night cafes in and around the game room in each of the colleges. So just playing like table tennis, foosball, stuff like that with friends, hanging out. On the weekends, maybe going like for a hike close by, going bowling, watching a movie, typical stuff. But Yale has a cool concept of intramurals, which are these basically we have the 14 residential colleges that I mentioned, and each of them has like their own team for these intramural sports. So there's regular sports like football, um, what else? Football, table tennis, like whatever normal sports. But there's also a few like interesting sports like broom ball, which is essentially you go on the ice skating rink, and you use like the normal ice hockey like sticks with instead of a puck, a ball, and you're not wearing like skates, you're wearing your shoes. So you like slip and fall quite a bit. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So broom ball and I guess seasonal sports that happen every like few months. And so these intramurals typically run um for like batches of 3 months around the semester, and you compete within colleges. My college, Trumbull College, I think is like third right now for the cup, and they continue for both semesters. And yeah, so playing those sports whenever you want. It's very low commitment. You go whenever you want, but it's again within the residential college like atmosphere, so it's another sense of community. And then playing those sports with friends is just a lot of fun.
Yeah, and you talked a lot about food, but obviously you're vegetarian, so your options are a bit limited. So, what's your favorite meal or snack on campus?
So first 2 years you have to be on campus, both housing and meal plan. And so right now I think my favorite meal of the week is brunch. Every weekend they don't do breakfast and lunch, they just do brunch. So it's like combination of both breakfast food like eggs, bagels, pancakes, French toast, stuff like that, but also like lunch food, which would be like maybe pasta, lasagna, I don't know, whatever, random stuff. So just like combining both of them, which is my favorite meal because I just have more options, nicer things to eat. And Yale has amazing brunch. They have amazing like pancakes and just good brunch food through
I'm
the
like,
week. So that's definitely my favorite meal
I'm
of the
laughing
week.
because we have the canteen food and like the hostel brunch for our class,
Yeah,
and you're saying like pancakes and like lasagna and stuff. There's a big difference.
there's a big difference. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
College food more for the most part is pretty good. Dinners tend to be more difficult finding vegetarian options just because there aren't as many. Then you have to eat like there's always pizza and pasta. So if it's if it means either going out and eating with friends at like restaurants, which in New Haven, because Yale isn't like a gated campus, restaurants are like all around campus. So it's pretty walkable, or just eating pizza and pasta.